And so their brain has to create memories for it to fill in that gap of time. What happened to those kids in that house during that half hour? Was it just questions and answers, or was it something more alien, more dark? I think it would be very interesting to find out if those two kids now, as adults, are petrified whenever they see a clown. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. Twitter is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great weekend, guys. Okay, everyone, that was episode Sam the Sandown Clown. Cole and Danielle and Tommy Davidson, thank you so much for recommending that episode. I gotta say, Cole and Danielle recommended this the last time I asked for recommendations, and I didn't want to do it. I did not want to cover this episode as a Dead Rabbit Radio Classics. I'll get into that. And then Tommy Davidson showed up, and I love his work on In Living Color. I wonder how much Tommy Davidson gets that joke. But once, not that Cole and Danielle, they recommended, I was like, phew, no way. And then I was like, ooh, Tommy Davidson, he recommended it. No, it was like, I was going to do it eventually, but I was like, I don't like this episode. It's so funny. It's a good episode, but it brings back bad memories. So, let's talk about this one. I got some interesting stuff to say about this one. Episode 283. So I'm putting out 20 episodes a month, roughly. So this would have been in the first year. This would have been a program. Maybe right after a year. Because I take breaks every now and then. I was at the end of I was getting ready to wrap it up, guys. Like, I was like, I can't. I remember this episode. When I listen to this episode, this is why I wanted to talk about this at the end of the episode, and I hope people stuck around for this, because this is an interesting behind-the-scenes thing. When I listen to this episode, I almost hear it's over in my voice. I almost hear myself, like, shutting... It's almost like I can hear myself shutting the shutters in the Dead Rabbit Workshop. It was really weird. It was both an episode where I was getting ready to quit and an episode of a new era of Dead Rabbit Radio. It was a really weird time for that. Let's talk about the episode, though, and I'll kind of explain why. Well, actually, let me do this first, because we'll put it in context. I was running out of stuff to talk about. I remember, because again, it had been a year of doing 2 stories a day for 283 episodes. So at that point, we're at 5. I had come up with 500 or more stories. Some episodes had 3 stories. Very few do I only cover 1. I was running out of stuff. I was running out of stuff to talk about, and my work structure back then is way different than it is now. Where, because I've run into that problem so many times, where I'm running out of stuff to talk about for the week, and I'm scrounging for stories. Now I have a new system that has eliminated that for the most part. It's really cut down on that. Takes more time. I do more research, but the problem necessarily isn't the research, it's finding the stories in the first place. I remember when I was coming across this episode, I was like, I don't have anything to talk about. I only put out stuff that I would want to listen to, so I don't think I ever put out crummy stories, but I have recorded crummy episodes. I've recorded full half-hour long 2 to 3 stories, and then just saved the file, put it in a folder, and started from scratch. And when you're doing a daily show, that's a lot of work. That's a day's worth of work gone. So I was kind of at the end of my rope when I did Sam the Sandown Clown. And what happened was, it was a miracle, really. I really consider it a miracle. It's so funny because the people who operate the website, they're just a couple cool guys. They have their own podcast. I was looking for stories and I stumbled across a website called Cryptopia. And it was nothing but cryptid stories. And one of the very first stories I read on Cryptopia was Sam the Sandown Clown, which I misspelled the name in my episode title. So I think that also shows my mental state at the time. I wasn't even paying attention to errors, very, very easily fixed errors. It's still a mistake, and I'll probably fix it before this episode goes up, but maybe not. But yeah, when I listened to this episode, I wasn't in a good mental headspace. I remember just being very, very just... It was probably it's 283, so it was towards the end of a season. You know, I do breaks every 50 episodes, so it was towards the end of the season. I tend to get more burned out then. And I just couldn't find anything, and I found this website called Cryptopia, and I was like, this is it. Now, what happened was, if you'll see, there was a time period where all I was covering was cryptids. And that also led me into a time where I think that I leaned too heavily on the cryptids. So it wasn't a great time for me mentally with the show. So when I saw this episode, when Cole and Danielle recommended it, I hadn't listened to the episode since I had recorded it, and I go, oh great. Because it brought back that instant memory. It brought back, I remember finding a story about Sam the Sandown Clown and being like, we're back, baby. Like, this is a really cool website. This is a really cool story. We're ready to go. But even when I was recording the episode, I was still thinking, how long will this show last? Like, I've been throwing this life raft of having this new episode or this new story website, Cryptopia. This was before ThinkAboutItDocs.com, see, and I'm always concerned about running out of stuff. Eventually, we will start to run out of stuff, but I know this is kind of a downer behind the scenes thing, but I think it's important because it does show that kind of ebb and flow. And then I don't know if I'm pretty sure Cryptopia is when I started doing all the cryptids, and I remember even some of you guys are starting getting, I very, very, very rarely get complaints about this show, but I remember starting getting emails from people or YouTube comments saying, hey, you've been covering a lot of cryptids lately. Because that's all I was doing. It was almost like I was a man who was shutting down his store because I didn't think I'd find anything else, finding a resource and then leaning so heavily on that resource that people were like, hey man, I really love your show, I really love all the different stories you talk about. Nudge, nudge. Don't keep covering the same thing. Even though those cryptid stories are great, they're really cool cryptid stories, I think there was too many back to back. So I remember Sam the Sandown Clown was kind of the start of that. I'm not knocking the story. The story's great. The stuff that Cryptopia came up with is great. I'm not knocking the episodes themselves. I just think they could have been spaced out a little bit differently. So re-listening to this episode, which I hadn't listened to in years, it was really interesting. I do have to say personally, if I was doing the episode today, I totally would have edited out the Return to Oz bit. What was that? See, again, like, even when I was re-listening to this, I was reliving this, like, mental state, and I was like, what are you talking about, bro? I still would have told the Return to Oz thing, but I think it would have been shorter. Just start talking about flying beds, and I go on this full, like, it's a 30-minute podcast, and I spend 5 minutes talking about Return to Oz. Great movie, by the way. Dead Rabbit recommends Return to Oz, but just so bizarre, out of place. And I also enjoy this episode because every so often, one of the complaints I get nowadays is, you used to cover stuff on the conspiracy theory iceberg, now you just talk about people peeing on each other. And in this episode, a girl gets peed on, which is horrible. It's horrible that it happened to her. But I think long time listeners of Dead Rabbit Radio will know. I've been covering pee on me, so it has nothing to do with, to me, that's a mainstay of the show. Like, if a too long goes by without me covering a story where someone gets peed on, people will email and be like, hey man, really love all the variety of episodes, but nudge nudge, more pee. Are you okay? You haven't covered a pee story in a while. So listening back to this episode, I really do enjoy it. I do have to say I'm super glad I ditched the gimmick where the Patreons were in this. Oh, that was awful. What was I thinking? That was another segment that just went on way too long. I'm naming these 3 people. What was that? You're the girl. No, you're the girl. What? See, so this is the thing. I have a love-hate relationship with this episode. I was mentally not in a good space when I was looking at the future of the show. I also found a brand new resource that I was going to be able to get stuff from and give credit to. I didn't steal anything from them. I always give them credit in the show notes, if not on the episode itself. But then I look at just bafflingly bad decisions like that. I actually stole that idea from Sofa King Podcast. They would put their Patreon users as characters in the stories, and it sucked when they did it. I don't know why I thought I could get away with it. They ditched it after a couple episodes. I don't know what I was thinking. So, again, when I listen to this episode, I hear the mental anguish of a young Jason Carpenter. But I think the story of the Sandown Clown, if I was going to redo any episode, this would be one of them. I really enjoyed the story of the Sandown Clown, and once I get out of my way, once I stop cracking dumb jokes about who's the Patreon and who's this, and Carson's floating around in the ghost and all that stuff, once the story starts, it works. The story about the young girl getting peed on, it works. If I could just get out of my own way. And that's where when I listen to it, I'm like, Anyways, people don't like it when I call myself an idiot. But thank you, Colin, Danielle, and Tommy Davidson. I think it's a pivotal episode for Dead Rabbit Radio. I really do. And I'm glad you guys chose it. It's honestly one I would not have chosen as a Dead Rabbit Radio classic. Not because I don't think it's great stories, but because the bad memories. I would not have wanted to listen to this one. But I'm glad you guys enjoy it, and I think the stories overcome my own personal foibles. So there we go. This was one that, again, was a long time in the classics making, and we have done it. And can't think of, there's not many episodes that have such an emotional attachment to it. The episode we're going to cover tomorrow, though, I also remember being in an interesting headspace. So that is a tease for tomorrow's classic episode. I will see you guys then. Have a great day, guys. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio Classics, where we take a look at a classic episode with some behind-the-scenes information. Now, this one is recommended to me by longtime supporter of the show, Cantillions. Cantillions, if memory serves me correctly, was one of the earliest followers of the podcast. I'm talking Ash Blacker, the guy who developed the original logo. I'm pretty sure Cantillions was an early adapter to the podcast, so Cantillions, really appreciate all the support, all this time. Cantillions recommended this episode, and it's an interesting one. I have a lot to say about it, and I'm going to have some behind-the-scenes information at the end of the episode. If you've listened to the episode, you can skip to the end. If you haven't, I recommend giving it a check. Is that a thing? Do people go, hey, I'm going to give that book a check? But do that thing I just invented? So I'm going to have some behind-the-scenes information at the end, but for now, go ahead and listen to episode 182. Was the world destroyed in the 1860s? A man hunts for a monster only he believes in, and then today is the day. I know I always say this, but the most requested topic, just wait till I read the list of names of people who have requested this story. It's from the Conspiracy Iceberg, and it may change the way you think about history, because now we are going to tackle the Great Mud Flood today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you are having a great day too. I'm always happy when I start recording again. Because, I go maybe two days without recording, and some days I bulk record episodes when I have a lot of free time. But it's always nice to come back. It's always nice to get back on the mic, and I'm having a lot of fun, and I hope you guys are still having a lot of fun listening to the show as well. So this first story is actually a recommendation. I got it. This was in my email, and this was sent by Moss X, one of the two, but I appreciate this story. So he goes, hey, here's a story idea for you. Honey Island Swamp Monster. Probably never heard of it before. And it was funny because he also said that it's... The way that I read sometimes, especially when I'm reading emails and stuff like that, before I respond, I have to read it again. When I'm initially reading it, my eyes kind of scan it real quickly. So I see the title, Honey Island Swamp Monster, and then I see the word smell. So I was like, a monster that smells like honey? I'm in. But then I realized that it was just a smelly monster, but it was still intriguing. Although I would have enjoyed the sweet-smelling monster. I wonder if any cryptids do smell good. out there. I wonder if there's a cryptid that smells like sweet, sweet flowers. Ghosts do, so I don't see why cryptids wouldn't. Anyways, so we're going to Louisiana, and a little bit out of New Orleans, a little